A Classroom Pet by J. Christopher Edgar with help from Maxim and Maddie Max Edgar. Read by Heather L. Green. Once upon a time, Carlos's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a goldfish. This was a good idea. This was a good idea because goldfish are easy to keep. You just need a glass bowl, some water, and fish food. Fish food can be purchased at many stores, including grocery stores. Goldfish are beautiful pets. The end. Once upon a time, Luca's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a frog. This was a good idea, except they had to feed the frog flies, and so the children had to spend all their recess time catching flies. Most of the children did not enjoy catching flies. The end. Once upon a time, Birdie's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a lion. This was a bad idea. This was a bad idea because when the lion was hungry, the lion ate a child. This made the teacher and the children very sad. The end. Once upon a time, Lily's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get an eagle. This was a bad idea. This was a bad idea because the eagle often flew around the room, screeching and tearing out children's hair with its claws and beak. This made the children's hair very messy. Many of the kids were bald by the end of the school year. The end. Once upon a time, Adara's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get an elephant. This was a bad idea. It was a bad idea because the elephant was so big that there was barely room for the kids. And also, the elephant ate too much. And also, the room was filled with elephant poop. Also, sometimes the elephant would grab a child with its trunk and fling them out the window. The end. Once upon a time, Maddie Max's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a unicorn. This was a bad and a good idea. This was a bad idea because unicorns don't exist, so they just bought a unicorn stuffy. It was a good idea because if they did have a real unicorn, the unicorn's sharp horn might poke out a child's eye. The end. Once upon a time, Effie's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a monkey. This was a bad idea. It was a bad idea because the monkey made very loud and disruptive ooh, ooh, ah, 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 ah sounds. And sometimes the monkey threw poop at the children. The children often went home smelling bad. The end. Once upon a time, Adriel's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a shark. This was a bad idea. This was a bad idea because sharks need lots of water. There was not enough water in the classroom, and so the shark died. A dead shark is not a good pet. The end. Once upon a time, Jude's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a rabbit. This was a good idea. It was a good idea because bunny rabbits are cute and they're easy to feed. Just some carrots, lettuce, and water. Rabbits are also soft and nice to pet. The end. Once upon a time, Maxim's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a python. This was a bad idea. It was a bad idea because when the snake was hungry, it would chase the children round and round and round the room. The children were scared to come to class. The end. Once upon a time, Molly's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get some sheep. This is a good idea if your classroom floor is made of grass because the sheep can eat the grass, and so you don't need to mow the grass to keep it short. The end. Once upon a time, Weiwei's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a giraffe. This is a bad idea if your classroom is in a skyscraper because there are no trees that reach that high for the giraffe to find leaves to eat. The end. Once upon a time, Zaray's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a tarantula. In some ways, this was a bad idea as many children are afraid of tarantulas. But in actuality, most tarantulas are not dangerous to humans. Although some people get skin rashes from the hairs on the tarantula's belly, All you have to do is wash your hands after holding a tarantula to stop the itching. The end. Once upon a time, Meilon's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a blue whale. Unless your classroom is under the sea, this is a very bad idea. First, they are too large. Second, they eat too much. And third, they could roll over and smush you into the ground. The end. Once upon a time, Rocio's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get a penguin. This was a bad idea. First, it was a bad idea because penguins need to be in the snow, and so it was always cold inside the classroom. Second, the penguins often jumped on the desks and danced, much disrupting the children while they were working. The end. Once upon a time, Reuben's class decided to get a class pet. They decided to get some jellyfish. This was mostly a good idea. The jellyfish floating through the classroom looked so lovely. The only downside, and a minor one at that, was that from time to time the jellyfish's tentacles would brush against a child and sting them. The end. Visit www.jchristopheredgar.com to purchase children's books by J. Christopher Edgar. Halloweening Shampooing, a children's book for purchase at www.jchristopheredgar.com. Brains Change, a board book for expecting and new parents, for purchase at www.jchristopheredgar.com. Coming in early 2024, The Saddest Book, sitting with our children and saying goodbye to so many species. Coming late 2024, Making Things, 2 children build race cars, submarines, robots, and more. A week of wild and perilous adventures. Subscribe to J. Christopher Edgar's YouTube channel to find videos for children. Contributions support the creation of books for children.